What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Ordell, and in today's video we got a quick introduction to the Herrstrom Gambit, a funky little opening that can get you some quick wins against the King's Indian attack / Reti Opening, particularly in bullet chess. Now, it's a response against the move knight f3 with the Reti. Most of the time, if you see this move, white is going to want to play g3, followed by fianchettoing the light squared bishop, castling kingside, and then continuing with d3, really trying to fight for those light squares. A very solid opening, particularly in bullet chess, because you can do a bunch of pre-moves. But surprisingly, guys, against this move of knight f3, the highest performing option is also the worst possible move, according to the computer engine. There's only two moves here that simply give up material at move one of them being e5 with the Ross Gambit, and the other, which is what we're going to cover in today's video, with the Herrstrom Gambit of g5. Now, obviously, the best move here for white is knight takes g5, and we're going to cover what to do against this later on in this video. But let's first cover the most popular option if you look on online databases with this move g3. Now, yes, I don't think that white usually goes, you know what, I don't really want to take this pawn. I'm simply going to continue with g3. I think much of the time, white pre-moves to g3. But if we see this happen, we can now play this move of g4. And yet again, this move of bishop g2 is the most popular option if you look on online chess. It's been played over 16,000 times. And obviously, if white does this, we simply go up a piece. Most of the time, if you're trying to go into this Reti Opening King's Indian attack type setup with knight f3 and g3, you can simply pre-move. I mean, you can play moves like knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castling kingside. There's usually not much that you're going to see to get in the way of this. But obviously, if white does this against the Herrstrom, we're simply going to go up a piece, or maybe even more if white continues to pre-move. So the big question is, okay, what happens if white sees this pawn on g4 and goes, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not going to play my normal bishop g2, I got to move this knight somewhere. Well, really, this move of knight h4 is the only option that gives white the edge. And I'm actually surprised to see that this move isn't played all that often. I mean, really, this move, knight h4, may seem passive as the knight on the rim is dim, but it does attack some key squares. And on top of that, more importantly, it's really hard to attack. I mean, this pawn on g4 can't kick it around anymore. This pawn on h7 obviously cannot attack this knight and kick it around. So we're going to have to find a different way to go after that minor piece. In this case, I kind of like just fianchettoing my bishop on g7, or at least a version of fianchettoing with my pawn all the way down to g4. And if here of a move like bishop g2 is played, we can play knight c6. Notice how we're really trying to fight for the dark squares in the center of the board. Notice also how d4 cannot even be played because we have two minor pieces attacking that centralized square. On top of that, a move like knight f5 may seem a little bit intimidating, but it really doesn't pose much of a threat because we have bishop f6 ready to go. And after that, it's like, okay, what on earth is this knight trying to do? Following knight f5 and bishop f6, we're simply going to move our d-pawn and be attacking that knight on f5 in the process. It is attacking some squares, but they're all well defended. So again, knight f5 really doesn't pose much of a threat because of that bishop f6 idea. Here, if we see a move like e4, we can now play d6, right? Trying to activate this bishop, defend the pawn on g4, and also keep an eye on this f5 square. And look, I mean, if white just plays a normal looking move here like knight c3, I kind of like this idea of bishop f6, just keeping an eye on this knight. And if we do take this knight on h4, white is going to have double isolated pawns on the h-file, and this pawn on h4 in particular is going to be a big weakness. And here, if you see white try to avoid this with a move like knight f5, we can continue to expand on the king side with h5, really doing two things. First off, h4 ideas are in the air in the future, depending on what white plays. And more importantly, we're simply defending this pawn on g4. Now, one move I do want to cover here is this idea of h3. It seems as if after h3, these pawns are simply too far overextended. But if you see this move, just capture that pawn right off the board, right? You got one of your two big targets already off the board at move 8. And here, if we see an idea like bishop takes h3, we can always play e6, kicking this knight back, followed by h4, trading off the second pawn. And if rook takes h3 is played, it seems as if we simply cannot defend this pawn any longer. And the truth is, we can't. Only this rook defends it, and a move like knight f6 simply is not possible. But what we can do is continue now with an idea like e6, followed by h4, or even this move of knight d4, really trying to activate our minor pieces. Right now, we got two of them clamping down on this knight on f5. And here if the knight tries to take on d4, thank you for the rook on h3. And if a move here like rook takes h5, okay, let's just take this rook off the board. And after queen takes h5, notice what is no longer defended. We got knight takes c2 with check against the king, followed by capturing off this rook. White can try something like queen h7, but in that case, okay, let's just play king f8. This king may seem to be in a little bit of danger, but the honest truth is that we're simply up 5 points in material. We're going to continue to trade down here. In fact, right now, let's say white plays a move like d3 trying to activate this bishop. We can simply capture off that knight on f5. We're up in material. We're going to continue to trade down. And on top of that, our knight anyone is not going to be trapped because we can find an easy way out in this game. So if you see this position, in which case white plays g3 at move 2, and you continue with your crazy-looking Herrstrom Gambit with g4 attacking that knight on f3, knight h4 is the best option, but even then, we're going to continue with moves like bishop g7 and knight c6 with bishop f6 ideas in the air attacking that knight, and we're going to be okay. What happens here if white plays the most popular option with a move like knight d4? Well, in this case, let's just start kicking this knight around. Let's play c5, kicking this knight back to a square like b3, in which case, why not just keep pushing? This may seem like a bad move of c4 as if we're making these pawns big weaknesses, but notice we're going to keep getting more and more tempo against this knight, and there's simply no way that this knight can get out of it. I mean, even if white plays a move like knight c5, we can play queen a5, activating our queen and attacking that minor piece. And here, if we see a move like knight d4, let's continue with e5, kicking this knight to a square like f5, in which case, yet again, we push a pawn with d5. Here, if knight h4, it becomes very apparent that white should have just played knight h4 right away because they've given up a huge space advantage in the center of the board. And now as black, we're going to have very good attacking chances. And if a move like knight e3, notice how white has played 7 moves and 6 of them are with this knight. I promise you that this isn't what the Reti player was planning when they played one knight f3. And in this case, we're just going to continue to keep pushing pawns with d4. Obviously, if a move like knight g2, white has a very cramped and awkward game going forward. And notice also how white can't really take our pawn on c4 unless they want to face this idea of queen d5, attacking the knight, attacking the rook. White simply cannot save both. And this is one of those positions where you go, gosh, maybe white should just throw in the towel. So y'all going all the way back to move 1, in which case we played this crazy-looking Herrstrom Gambit idea against the move of knight f3 with the Reti. You may see this move of g3, particularly in bullet chess, quite a bit, in which case you have the idea of playing g4 and potentially even taking out this knight and the bishop on g2, depending on how much white tries to pre-move. But let's now answer the question, okay, what happens if white isn't pre-moving, or what happens if you just play this in a blitz game or a regular game and white tries to take on g5? What do we do now? Well, I'm recommending this idea of e5, in which case most of the time, this isn't the best move, but most of the time you're going to see white just go back to f3, right? It's like, okay, I got a pawn. I don't know why on earth black did that, but okay, I'm just going to go right back. Well, in this case, let's just continue to push with e4 attacking that knight. And here, if we move like knight d4, we have d5. Notice how this is almost a reverse Alekhine's defense, except this time it's white playing with the Alekhine's defense. And on top of that, we simply do not have this pawn on the g-file. Here, white is obviously simply better, but I still think that this is somewhat manageable for black. I mean, here, if white continues with the best move of d3, trying to undermine our center, let's continue with c5. And now if we move like knight b3, we can capture on d3, continue with knight c6. And now if we move like g3, we can continue with the key idea of knight ge7, looking to support this pawn on d5 a little bit more. And on top of that, it also gives white the opportunity to fall into this trap of wanting to take on c5. This pawn may seem very tempting, but obviously if white does capture on c5, we simply continue with queen a5 check, and thank you for the knight. Now going back, I mean, white doesn't have to take this pawn on c5, which obviously just gives us a full minor piece in return. White could just continue with an idea such as bishop g2. If you do see this, I recommend continuing with ideas such as b6, reinforcing the positioning of this pawn, as well as bishop e6, reinforcing the center pawn on d5, as well as bishop g7. On a lot of variations as well, a move like rook g8 is also fun, as well as h5 and h4, looking to really undermine and put some pressure on the king side of the board. Again, not the best opening from black. I do not recommend playing this against Magnus Carlsen. It's probably not going to work. I mean, at the same time, what is going to work against Magnus Carlsen? But you get what I'm saying. This is much better for white, but at the same time, it is still somewhat playable for black, and I promise you that you're going to be much more comfortable in a position like this than your opponent, who was planning to play the King's Indian attack or an opening like it, and all of a sudden, they have a knight all the way over on b3, and a somewhat cramped game, at least at the current moment. So y'all, going back to this position, in which case we play the move of e5, trying to take up some control in the center while attacking the knight on g5. If you do see a move like knight f3, simply continue with e4 and d5 taking up that center, and black is going to have a somewhat manageable game. What do I recommend here from white? What do I think the best option is here for white against the very bad, if I'm being honest, Herrstrom Gambit with the idea of g5? Well, here against the move e5, I recommend white playing this move of d4, breaking through in the center of the board, putting some pressure on e5 while defending this knight on g5. In this case, we could play a move like h6, but why not try to also develop our pieces while kicking this knight off? Let's play this move of bishop e7. Obviously, here if a move like h4 from white, okay, at that point we can play h6. And here if an idea like knight f3, bringing this knight back, we can now, as always, push in the center with e4. We're down a material. We don't want to trade down. We definitely don't want to take on d4 and give white the opportunity to break this game open when we do have somewhat of an awkward game with no pawn on g7 and this bishop on e7. So let's continue now with e4, kicking this knight back, and now continue with a move like d5, trying to take full control of the center. We're just going to continue to naturally develop our pieces, ready to meet c4 with c6, really trying to reinforce this long light squared pawn chain. And here if we see a move like knight c3, I mean, let's be honest, we don't like that we're simply down a pawn on g7. We don't like that there's simply not a pawn there, but at the same time, we do have that open file. So let's take advantage of it. Let's play this move of rook g8, putting some pressure on this pawn on g2. And this is a somewhat hard position for white to play. Again, surprisingly, if you look on the Lichess database, white here is simply better according to the computer, but black still wins the majority of these games. And I think part of the reason is that this is just somewhat uncomfortable of a game to manage from the white side. I mean, even if white plays a move here like g3, we have bishop g4 ideas in the air, really trying to take control of those light squares. And even more than that, playing h5 followed by h4 ideas, again, trying to undermine the king side of the board and trying to break open this position. We're going to have the edge in development, so why not try to break this game open as quickly as we possibly can? One move here that does put some pressure on black here is this idea of queen b3. And here I think most players would just like to play a move like a6. The computer recommendation is queen b6, but I'm not going to recommend that you play this somewhat very strange computer recommendation move, trying to trade down when you're down in material. Instead, a move like a6 is solid. Even this move of king f8 may seem a little bit strange, but let's be honest. We're not going to castle queenside. Why not try to get this king to a somewhat safer square in case we ever do want to break through with b5? And actually breaking through with b5 right away is also a fascinating option, especially if you're playing with a faster time control. By doing this, we're simply giving white another pawn. After a move like queen takes b5 so that this pawn on g2 is still defended by the bishop, we are now down 2 pawns in material. But after this move of king f8, this is a hard position for white to navigate yet again. We have a very solid structure in the center with e4 and d5. There's really no way that white can put more pressure as of now on this pawn on d5. And now as black, we're going to continue to activate and develop our pieces. One key idea is playing something such as queen d6 and putting our knight on d7. We can also put our bishop on e6 or even look at bishop a6 ideas depending on what white goes with. We're going to continue to develop our pieces, put our rooks on the open back rank files. We're going to put some pressure on white, try to break this game open and go for the win. And no, this is not me saying that this is theoretically sound. In fact, right now, white has almost a +2 advantage. But at the same time, what does white do here? This is a hard position to navigate, and this could be fun for you guys if you're playing bullet chess or just playing with a friend and want to get a very interesting middle game position with some inequalities that you can work with. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to see my top 5 chess openings for black against the move of d4, by the way, these are actually good openings, click that video to the left. If you'd like to see our entire animal chess openings playlist, click that playlist to the right. Leave a comment down below to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.